She was left alone in the hospital, in her most painful moment. But just when everything seemed lost, a stranger walked in, and nothing would ever be the same again. Before we begin, comment where you're watching from, and enjoy the story. The hospital lights were harsh, almost blinding, and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside her bed was the only thing keeping her anchored. Emma could barely breathe through the pain. The contractions had started 2 hours ago, earlier than expected. Everything was happening so fast, yet the moment that broke her completely was slower than any pain she had felt before. "I can't do this," she whispered, clutching the edge of the bed, her eyes wide with fear. Across the room, Jake, her boyfriend, the father of her child, stood motionless, his jaw tight and his arms crossed. He had been pacing for the last 20 minutes, staring at the floor, tapping his foot, checking his phone. Emma needed him. She reached out her hand. "Jake, I need you here." But Jake didn't take her hand. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, and then he said the words she would never forget. "I'm not ready for this." "What?" she gasped. "I didn't sign up for this, Emma. I thought I could do it, but I can't. This isn't the life I want." "You're the father of this baby," she cried, her voice cracking. He looked away, grabbing his coat from a chair. "I'm sorry. You'll figure it out. You're strong, Emma." And with that, he walked out. No shouting, no goodbye, just silence and the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. Emma's entire world crumbled in that moment, not from the pain in her body, but from the hole tearing through her chest. She wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The tears fell quietly. The nurses came in and out, adjusting equipment, checking on her progress, but none of them noticed the empty chair beside her or the void she couldn't fill. She was truly alone, until the door opened again. But it wasn't Jake. It was a man in a dark navy suit, tall, confident, with a calm energy that somehow silenced the room. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a nurse. He had no name tag. And yet, something about the way he walked and made everyone stop. Emma blinked in confusion. The man looked directly at her, straight into her eyes, as if he already knew her, as if he had been looking for her. He took a few steps closer, paused at the side of her bed, and gently reached for her trembling hand. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice low, but full of something she hadn't heard in months. "Care. You're mine now." 12 hours earlier, Emma had spent the whole day trying to convince herself everything was going to be okay. Jake had been distant for weeks, always busy, always frustrated, barely touching her belly or asking about the baby anymore. But she told herself it was just stress, a big life change. He would come around. They were supposed to go to the hospital tour that afternoon, but Jake canceled last minute. Something came up at work, he had said over the phone. So Emma went alone. She walked the halls, met the nurses, asked the questions, smiled politely. She ignored the glances from the couples around her, the way husbands gently supported their wives as they waddled down the corridors. She ignored the feeling of emptiness in her side. Afterwards, she walked home slowly. The baby was due in just a few days, and she felt heavy. But she was proud of herself. Even if Jake wasn't ready, she was. Or, at least, she wanted to believe she was. That night, they barely spoke. Jake stayed on his phone, scrolling and sighing. Emma made dinner, but he barely touched it. "Are you okay?" she finally asked him. He shrugged. "I just don't think I'm cut out for this, Em. I'm not the dad type." She froze at the words. But she didn't argue. Not that night. She was too tired, and her back was hurting. So she went to bed quietly, alone, even though he was in the next room. At 3:47 a.m., the first contraction hit. Emma sat up, gasping. It felt like her entire body was tightening. She clutched her belly and breathed slowly, remembering what the nurse had said. Time them. Stay calm. Don't panic. The second one came 12 minutes later. She called Jake's name, her voice shaking. He came in, rubbing his eyes. "What is it?" I think it's starting." He stood there, still half asleep. "Now. Seriously." Emma nodded. Jake groaned and ran a hand through his hair. "Of course. Now." They got in the car. Emma was gripping her phone, counting the seconds between contractions. Jake drove, but he was quiet. Too quiet. No words of reassurance. No excitement. No comfort. And by the time they reached the hospital, Emma could already feel the tension building, not just in her body, but in his. As the nurse led her into the delivery room, Jake stayed behind in the hallway, hesitating. And soon after, he was gone. Back in the present moment, Emma stared up at the stranger beside her bed. Who was this man? She couldn't speak. She was too shocked. But somehow, his presence was grounding. The nurses didn't question him. Maybe they thought he was a relative. Maybe they assumed he was supposed to be there. But to Emma, he was just a mystery, and a strange sense of peace washed over her. His hand around hers was warm, strong, unshaking. "I know this feels like the worst moment of your life," he said softly, "but you're not alone anymore. I promise you that." Emma blinked away tears. Who are you?" she whispered. He gave a soft smile. "Someone who's been waiting a long time to meet you." Emma stared at the man beside her hospital bed, trying to steady her breathing as pain pulsed through her abdomen. The contractions were stronger now, more frequent. Nurses moved around the room, adjusting monitors and preparing for the delivery, but Emma's focus was fixed entirely on the stranger who hadn't let go of her hand. His touch was steady and warm, grounding. His voice, soft and deliberate, echoed in her mind like a lifeline. "You're not alone anymore. You're mine now." She blinked, confused. "Who are you?" The man smiled gently, his eyes kind but unreadable. "My name is Adrian. Adrian Wolfe." The name didn't ring a bell. She'd never heard of him. And yet there was something about him, his calm presence, the tailored suit, the way even the nurses didn't question his sudden appearance, that made him feel like he belonged. Emma's heart was still breaking from what Jake had done. She hadn't fully processed the abandonment. She didn't have time to. The labor was progressing quickly. Her body was in survival mode. But her mind clung to this one question like a life raft in a storm. Why was this man here? "You shouldn't be here," she said weakly. "You don't even know me." "I do," Adrian said, without hesitation. Another wave of pain struck her, and she cried out, squeezing his hand. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're scared, and I know this isn't how it was supposed to happen. But you're not going through this alone." Emma looked away. "He left me. Jake left me." Adrian nodded slowly, his expression darkening with understanding. He made a mistake he'll regret for the rest of his life. A nurse turned from the monitors. "She's dilating fast. We'll need to move soon." Emma's breathing quickened. "I'm not ready. I can't do this without." "Yes, you can," Adrian interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "You already are." Emma looked back at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Why are you helping me?" For a moment, Adrian hesitated. He stood up straight, letting go of her hand briefly to adjust the sleeves of his suit jacket. Then he said calmly, "Because someone very important asked me to." Before she could ask who, another contraction hit. Hard. Her body arched involuntarily as she let out a cry. The nurse came rushing back. "All right, we're moving her now." Adrian leaned in again. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right there." An hour later, the delivery room was hot, bright, loud. Emma screamed through gritted teeth as the doctor urged her to push. Her hair clung to her forehead, and her body felt like it was being torn in two. But through the haze of pain and adrenaline, she could still feel the grip of Adrian's hand in hers. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He stayed. "Almost there, Emma," the doctor said. "One more big push." She cried out, drawing all her strength from the hand she held. And then, just like that, a new cry filled the room. A baby's cry. Emma collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was sobbing, but this time they weren't tears of heartbreak. They were tears of relief, of life. The nurse brought the baby to her chest. "It's a girl." Emma stared down at the tiny face, the warm little body placed gently in her arms. Her daughter. I did it," she whispered. Adrian smiled beside her, wiping a tear from his own eye. "Yes, you did." The nurse asked gently, "Father's name for the birth certificate?" Emma froze. Her smile faltered. Her gaze dropped. She looked over at Adrian. He didn't say a word. Emma's mind raced. Jake had left. He had given up on them. But this man, this stranger, had walked into her darkest hour, without warning, and held her together. And now the world expected her to put someone's name down. I need time, she whispered to the nurse. Of course, the nurse said, stepping away. Adrian leaned in. No pressure. That's your decision. Emma looked at him carefully. Why do you care so much? Adrian looked down at the baby in her arms. Because your child is a gift. And someone very special once asked me if I ever had the chance to repay a debt. Emma blinked. What debt? Adrian hesitated. It's a long story. She narrowed her eyes slightly. I have time. Kind of. Adrian gave a small chuckle. Fair point. He took a deep breath. Years ago, I was in a different place. I was just starting out in the world, broke, lost, full of anger. One night, I ended up in the ER with a bad injury after a bar fight. I was drunk, bleeding. Nobody cared, except a nurse. Emma's eyes widened. She was kind, firm, didn't let me spiral. She sat beside me the whole night, even after her shift. Her name was Lily. Emma gasped. My mother's name was Lily. Adrian nodded. She changed my life. She helped me clean up, told me I wasn't broken. She gave me money for a taxi that night and made me promise I'd do something meaningful with my life. And I did. I built my company. I became the man I am. But I never forgot her. Emma's hand trembled around her baby. She died when I was 16, cancer. She never told me anything about that night. She probably didn't see it as anything remarkable. But it was. She saved me. And before she passed, I found her obituary. I saw your name listed as her daughter. I started following your journey, not in a creepy way. I wanted to know the kind of person she raised. Emma was stunned. You've known about me for that long? Adrian nodded slowly. And when I heard what Jake did, I couldn't stay away. I had to be here. I owed your mother that much. Emma looked down at her daughter, emotions swirling in her chest like a storm. She would have loved you. I hope so, he said quietly. Later that night, the hospital room was quiet now. The baby was sleeping in the bassinet beside the bed. Emma sat up slightly, sipping water, while Adrian stood near the window. The silence between them was soft, not awkward, but filled with thoughts neither had spoken yet. I don't even know what to say, Emma finally whispered. You just walked in and changed everything. Adrian turned. You don't have to say anything. I'm not expecting anything from you. I just want you to know you're not alone. Emma studied him. You don't even know if I'm worth it. You are, he said without hesitation. You were the moment your mother brought you into this world. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes again. But this time, they were gentle, hopeful. Will you stay? She asked quietly. Just for tonight? Adrian stepped closer, his voice barely audible. For as long as you need. The soft hum of machines and the occasional rustle of footsteps in the hallway were the only sounds that filled the hospital room. Outside the window, the city of Chicago blinked quietly under a pale moon, unaware of the transformation that had just taken place inside room 312. Emma lay awake in bed, one hand resting on her abdomen as if still feeling the memory of her daughter's presence inside her. Her other hand clutched the thin hospital blanket, as if trying to hold herself together. The exhaustion in her body was undeniable, but her mind refused to shut down. Across the room, Adrian Wolfe sat in a plain armchair, looking impossibly elegant even in such an unremarkable space. He had removed his suit jacket, folded it neatly over the back of the chair, and rolled up his sleeves. His eyes had remained on the sleeping baby for the past hour, silently watching the rise and fall of her tiny chest. Emma cleared her throat softly. You know you don't have to stay, right? Adrian looked up. His gaze met hers, calm and unwavering. I know. Most people would have left by now. After everything settled. After the baby came. I'm not most people. She let out a tired breath, a half laugh. Yeah. I figured that out when you walked into the delivery room like some kind of knight in a tailored suit. He smirked. I didn't mean to be dramatic. I just couldn't let you go through alone. Emma looked at him, her eyes studying the way the lamplight touched his face. You said you owed my mother, but you didn't owe me. No, Adrian replied, leaning forward. But I'm not here because of a debt anymore. She hesitated. Then why are you here? Adrian opened his mouth, then paused. Instead of answering directly, he stood and walked over to the small clear bassinet beside Emma's bed. He looked down at the baby girl sleeping peacefully, wrapped in a pink blanket. She looks like you, he said softly. Emma's throat tightened. Her name is Grace. He turned to her, repeating it quietly, almost reverently. Grace. I picked it months ago, she said, before everything started falling apart. Adrian glanced at her, then at the baby again. It suits her. Strong. Gentle. There was silence again. But this time, it felt comforting, like they were both letting the emotions of the day settle around them. Then Emma asked something she hadn't planned to say aloud. Are you married? Adrian looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. No. Ever been? No, he said again, slower this time. I came close once, but it didn't work out. Emma felt a pang of awkwardness. Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's okay, he interrupted gently. She left me for someone who could give her more attention. I was too caught up building my company. I missed dinners, birthdays, little things. In the end, she said she felt invisible. Emma nodded slowly. That must have hurt. It did, Adrian admitted. But it also taught me something. That success doesn't mean anything if you have no one to share it with. He walked back to the chair and sat down again, his eyes still on Grace. Emma watched him carefully. This man, this stranger, had just poured more honesty into her life in the last few hours than Jake had in years. And he wasn't asking for anything in return. Can I ask you something else? She said. Of course. Why did you say, you're mine now? When you first walked in. Adrian looked surprised for a second, then thoughtful. Because it felt like the right thing to say, he finally replied. I saw you alone, abandoned in pain. And something in me said, she deserves to be claimed by someone who won't walk away. Someone who sees her. Someone who stays. Emma didn't speak. Her throat was too tight. Adrian leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. I didn't mean it as possession. I meant it as protection, as devotion. I don't expect anything from you, Emma. But I want you to know, I'm here, and I'll keep being here, for as long as you'll let me. Emma turned her face toward the window to hide the tears that rolled silently down her cheeks. She had been strong for so long. Pretending Jake's absence didn't bother her. Pretending the future didn't terrify her. But tonight, she didn't have to pretend. Not with Adrian. She wiped her eyes and whispered, thank you. He smiled softly. Get some sleep. I'll be right here. And she did. For the first time in weeks, Emma slept deeply, with Grace beside her and Adrian watching over them both. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, casting golden lines across the white hospital floor. Emma stirred slowly, blinking away the sleep. For a moment, she wasn't sure where she was. Then she saw Grace sleeping peacefully, and Adrian still in the chair. He had drifted off sometime during the night, arms folded, head resting back against the wall. But even in sleep, he looked composed, like a man who didn't allow chaos to touch him. Emma sat up quietly, adjusting her pillow, careful not to wake him. But his eyes opened almost instantly. Good morning, he said, his voice husky. You stayed, she murmured. I told you I would. There was a knock on the door, and a nurse entered. Good morning. Time for vitals and breakfast. Adrian stood to the side, letting the nurse do her work. Emma blushed slightly when the nurse glanced between them and smiled knowingly. She's beautiful, the nurse said, referring to Grace. She really is, Adrian said, before Emma could answer. The nurse's eyebrows rose. You two did good. Emma's heart skipped. She opened her mouth to explain that he wasn't the father, that he had only just met her, that this was all new and unexpected. But she didn't say anything, because in that moment it didn't feel like a lie. Adrian was there, when it mattered most. Later that day, after discharge papers were signed and Grace was gently buckled into her new carrier, Emma stood at the hospital doors, unsure of what came next. Jake had never texted, never called. There was no one waiting to pick her up, no nursery waiting at home. And then, as if on cue, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Adrian stepped out of the driver's side, holding the door open. "I had the car brought over," he said. "Thought you might need a ride." Emma stared at him. "Why are you doing all of this for me?" Adrian met her gaze. "Because no one did it for me when I needed it most. And because your mother once gave me hope when I had none." Emma glanced down at Grace, then back at Adrian. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's go." And with that, she stepped into the car, not just toward a ride, but toward a life she never expected. The car ride was quiet. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Emma sat in the back seat beside Grace's car seat, watching her daughter sleep peacefully for the first time outside hospital walls. The world outside the tinted windows moved slowly, gray sidewalks, rows of parked cars, people rushing through their daily lives, all unaware of the storm Emma had just survived. Adrian sat in the front, glancing occasionally in the rearview mirror. But he said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence alone felt like a blanket, calm, steady, and protective. After 20 minutes, the car slowed in front of a tall, modern building made of glass and steel. The doorman nodded at Adrian and opened the car door without question, like he'd done it 100 times. Emma stepped out cautiously, holding Grace in her arms. The air was cool, the city buzzing around her. Adrian approached and gestured toward the building. "Come on. You both need rest, and this is safer than a one-bedroom apartment with no elevator." Emma raised an eyebrow. "How do you know where I live?" Adrian hesitated for a moment. "I looked you up a few weeks ago, after I read your mother's obituary. I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to know how you were doing." Emma didn't respond right away. There was a flicker of discomfort, of someone knowing too much, but the sincerity in his voice disarmed her. And right now, she needed help. She could admit that. So she nodded. "Okay." Inside the penthouse. The elevator opened directly into a spacious penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city skyline. The living room was elegantly furnished, but not overwhelming. Sleek lines, warm tones, soft lighting. There was a fireplace, already lit. A large sofa, plush and inviting. Emma stepped inside slowly, adjusting Grace in her arms. "This is," she paused, trying to find the right word, "beautiful." "I hope it's comfortable too," Adrian said as he took her hospital bag and set it gently near the couch. "You can stay here as long as you need. No rush. No expectations." Emma turned to him. "Adrian, I can't just live in your home. I don't even know you." "You know enough," he said gently. "You know I won't leave. And that's more than most people." Emma bit her lip. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him she didn't need saving, that she'd been doing this on her own for months now. But the exhaustion in her bones told the truth. The truth was, she did need help. She just didn't know how to ask for it. She looked around the room again. "Is there a room for Grace and me?" He nodded. "Second door on the left. It used to be a guest room. I had it cleaned and prepped this morning." Emma blinked. "You did all that today?" He shrugged. "You were doing something much more difficult." She smiled faintly and walked down the hallway. The room was soft and light, with creamy walls and gentle curtains. On the nightstand was a small vase of fresh flowers. The crib in the corner was brand new. Tears filled her eyes again. She hadn't cried this much in years. A few hours later, Emma had managed to nap for a couple of hours while Grace slept in the crib beside her. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, the aroma of something warm and buttery drifted through the air. She followed the scent into the open kitchen. Adrian was standing by the stove in a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up again, stirring something in a saucepan. She paused in the doorway. "You cook." He turned around with a faint smile. "I survive. Tonight, I figured pasta would be safest." Emma glanced at the table. 2 plates were already set. A pitcher of water. Candles. She blinked. "Are we having dinner?" "Only if you're hungry," he said. No pressure. She hesitated. I haven't had a meal sitting down in maybe 2 months. Adrian gestured toward the chair. Then let's make this the first one. Dinner conversation. The first few minutes were quiet. Emma took small bites, still adjusting to the fact that she was no longer in a hospital gown, no longer surrounded by machines, no longer alone. Adrian didn't push. He just sat across from her, content to eat in silence. Finally, she asked, "How did you become who you are?" He looked up. "That's a big question." "We've got pasta," she said with a small smile. He chuckled. "All right. I started with nothing. Like I said, I was a mess when your mom found me. After she helped me, I enrolled in night classes, got a business degree, launched a small tech startup. It failed. Then I launched another one. That one barely survived. The third one? That's the company I run now." Emma tilted her head. "What do you do exactly?" "Software that helps small businesses manage finances, inventory, payroll. Nothing flashy. But it works. We help a lot of people." She nodded. "My mom would have liked that." "I hope so," Adrian said softly. Then he looked at her with quiet intensity. "And what about you? What did you want to do before all this?" Emma blinked. No one had asked her that in a long time. "I was studying early childhood education," she said. "I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. I was halfway through when, well, life happened." "Do you want to go back?" She hesitated. "Maybe. One day. I could help." Emma froze. "Adrian." He raised a hand. "No pressure. Just keep it in mind. If you ever want to finish, I'll make sure you can." She stared at him, overwhelmed by the ease with which he offered support without strings. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she whispered. Adrian met her gaze. "Because I know what it feels like to be unseen. And I swore if I ever had the power to change that for someone else, I would." Later that night, Emma stood in the doorway of Grace's room, watching her baby sleep. The nightlight cast a soft glow over the crib. Behind her, Adrian leaned against the hallway wall, silent. "She looks like my mom," Emma whispered. "Same nose. Same tiny mouth." Adrian nodded. "She'd be proud of you." Emma turned, her eyes full. "You think so? I know so." A silence stretched between them. Then Emma said something she hadn't planned to say. "Will you stay tonight?" "Just outside the door." Adrian's eyes softened. "I'll stay wherever you need me to." And so he did. Outside her room, Adrian sat in the hallway in a worn armchair he'd dragged over. He kept watch through the night, his phone in his lap, but his eyes always drifting toward the door. Something had changed. This wasn't just about a promise anymore. This was about something deeper, something neither of them could name yet. But it was there, and it was just beginning. The morning sun filtered gently through the sheer curtains of the guest room, casting golden shadows across the floor. Emma stirred slowly, waking to the peaceful sound of her daughters breathing and the distant hum of city traffic. Grace was still asleep in the crib, her tiny fists curled beneath her chin. For a moment, everything felt right. No Jake. No shouting. No fear. Just silence. Safety. Emma sat up, stretching carefully before padding out into the hallway. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she stopped when she saw Adrian asleep in the armchair outside the door, just as she'd asked. His head was tilted slightly, arms crossed over his chest. Even in sleep, there was something steady about him, like the kind of person who didn't make promises lightly. Emma watched him for a moment longer, touched by the quiet devotion he didn't even announce. Then she stepped back into the room to check on Grace. A few minutes later, the smell of fresh coffee wafted through the penthouse. Emma followed it to the kitchen, where Adrian was already awake and pouring 2 cups. "I made you one," he said without turning. "You look like you needed it." She smiled. "I really do." They sat at the kitchen island in comfortable silence. Emma took slow sips of the dark roast, her eyes on the skyline through the glass windows. After a moment, she spoke. "It feels strange." "What does?" Adrian asked. "This. Waking up in a place where no one's yelling, where I'm not being judged or blamed for everything going wrong." Adrian looked at her carefully. "Did Jake do that to you often?" She paused. "Yeah. He made me feel like I was too emotional. Too much. Like being pregnant made me a burden. Adrian's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Emma looked down into her coffee. I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost until I left that hospital room and you were standing there. Adrian's voice was low. You didn't lose yourself. You were buried under someone else's neglect. That's not the same. She blinked back tears. Again, this man had a way of saying exactly what she needed without sounding like he was trying. Thanks for breakfast, she said softly. And everything else. He nodded. It's not charity, Emma. You don't owe me anything. I know. But I still want to say thank you. They shared a quiet smile. But the peace didn't last. Because just after breakfast, Emma's phone buzzed violently across the counter. It vibrated twice, then stopped. Jake. His name flashed on the screen like poison. Emma froze. Adrian looked at her. You don't have to answer that. But she already had. The phone call. What do you want? Emma asked coldly. Jake's voice on the other end was chipper. Almost too casual. Emma. Hey. I was just checking in. I heard the baby was born. She could hardly believe her ears. You heard? Yeah, I talked to your cousin. She said everything went well. You left me, she said, her voice trembling with restrained rage. You walked out while I was in labor, Jake. Do you even understand what that did to me? There was silence. Then Jake sighed. Okay, look. I panicked. I wasn't ready. But I've had time to think. And I want to come see the baby. Emma was stunned. Now you want to be a father? I mean, yeah. I was there at the beginning. I should at least be in her life, don't you think? Emma's grip on the phone tightened. No. You don't get to pick and choose when you're in or out. Jake's voice grew sharper. You're staying with some guy, aren't you? I saw your photo on someone's story. Expensive apartment. Who is he? Emma said nothing. Jake scoffed. Right. So, you're replacing me? Rich guy swoops in, and you forget everything we've been through. I didn't forget anything, Emma said coldly. I remember every time you ignored me. Every time you made me feel worthless. Every time you reminded me I was a mistake. Jake didn't respond immediately. Then he said, You're still legally tied to me. Don't forget that. She blinked. What are you talking about? I signed the lease on your apartment. My name's still on it. You want to push me out of Grace's life? Fine. But don't be surprised when I start fighting for custody. Emma's stomach dropped. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You wouldn't dare. I'd think twice before getting too cozy with your new boyfriend, Jake growled. You never know when people stop pretending to be heroes. He hung up. Emma stared at the screen in shock. Her chest burned. Her hands were shaking. Adrian's reaction. Adrian had been watching her face the entire time. As soon as she ended the call, he stood up and walked over. What did he say? Emma swallowed. He's threatening me. Talking about custody. About the lease. He knows I'm here. Adrian's voice was ice. Did he threaten Grace? He didn't say it directly. But I know him. He'll make this hard just to hurt me. Adrian ran a hand down his face and took a deep breath. Okay. First, we'll get your name off that lease. I'll have my legal team handle it. And second, if he even thinks about trying to manipulate you through Grace, he'll find himself buried in legal trouble he can't crawl out of. Emma looked at him, heart pounding. You'd do that for me? He stepped closer. I'll protect both of you, Emma. That's not up for debate. But if he goes public, if he posts something or tells people you're trying to take his child. I don't care what he says, Adrian interrupted. Let him shout into the wind. I know who I am. And soon enough, so will everyone else. Emma exhaled shakily. Do you trust me? He asked softly. She nodded, tears threatening again. More than I trust myself. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Then let me take care of this. That afternoon, Adrian's legal team worked fast. Emma was removed from the lease within hours, and Jake received a formal cease and desist warning through a lawyer's office, cautioning him against any harassment or false claims regarding custody. Emma watched it all unfold in disbelief. The same girl who had once skipped meals to save for prenatal vitamins was now watching lawyers defend her like she mattered. And maybe for the first time, she did. That night, Emma sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, Grace asleep inside. Adrian joined her with 2 mugs of tea. They sipped quietly, looking out over the skyline. "I never imagined life would look like this," Emma said. Adrian glanced at her. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But I think it might be a beginning." Adrian smiled faintly. "Then let's begin." 2 weeks passed like a quiet miracle. Emma fell into a rhythm she never imagined possible. Mornings filled with the soft cries of Grace, afternoons with bottles, lullabies, and naps. Her days were no longer dictated by fear or isolation, but by warmth, stability, even joy. Adrian had kept his promise. He never left. Each morning, he greeted her with breakfast. Each night, he passed by Grace's crib with a softness in his eyes that Emma hadn't seen in any man before. Not even Jake. Especially not Jake. He never crossed boundaries, never imposed himself. He offered without asking, supported without demanding, and when Emma needed space, he stepped back silently, respectfully. And yet, his presence was always there. Steady. Safe. By the 3rd week, Emma caught herself laughing at the kitchen table as Adrian told a story about a failed business meeting that ended with a goat escaping into a boardroom in Bali. "You're making that up," she chuckled. "I swear," Adrian grinned. "There's footage. Somewhere." "You," she started to say, then paused. Her smile faded, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "You make it feel like life didn't end the night I gave birth." Adrian's smile softened. "That's because it didn't end. It began." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Emma didn't look away. A trip outside. By the end of the month, Adrian suggested they go out. "Just for a walk," he said. "You've been indoors for weeks. Let the city see Grace." Emma hesitated. "What if Jake finds us?" "He won't. Not unless you want to be found." After some thought, she agreed. They bundled up Grace in her carrier, wrapped in a soft beige blanket, and headed to Lincoln Park. The air was cool but refreshing, the early spring sun stretching across the trees like golden lace. Emma held onto Adrian's arm as they walked the paved paths, a quiet smile on her face. They passed couples, joggers, and families with strollers, none of whom paid them much attention. Until one did. A young woman stopped in her tracks, eyes widening. "Oh my God, are you Adrian Wolf?" Adrian turned politely. "Yes. I work at Bravestone Media. I saw you speak at the Future Leaders Summit last year," she said breathlessly. "You were amazing." "Thank you. That's kind of you to say," he replied with a smile. Her eyes flicked to Emma and Grace. "I didn't know you had a family," the woman said innocently. Adrian didn't miss a beat. "They're the best part of my life." Emma's eyes widened, but she said nothing. The woman smiled awkwardly. "Well, congratulations. All the best." She walked off. Emma looked at Adrian as they continued walking. "You didn't correct her." He glanced down at her. "Was I supposed to? I mean, we're not actually." "I know," he said gently. "But it didn't feel like a lie." Emma stopped walking. Adrian turned to face her. "You don't have to say things like that," she said quietly. "Not to make me feel better." "I'm not," he replied. "Emma, I've seen what real emptiness looks like. I've lived it. But these past few weeks, with you and Grace, they've made me feel more alive than the last 10 years of my life combined." Emma felt her throat tighten. Before she could respond, Grace let out a soft whimper from the carrier. Emma quickly unfastened the strap and lifted her daughter into her arms. Grace nuzzled against her, instantly soothed. Adrian watched them both like he was memorizing a painting. "Let's get home," he said softly. "You both deserve warmth." Later that night, Emma stood in the mirror, brushing her hair, wearing a soft robe Adrian had left for her on the bed that morning. The penthouse felt like home now. A temporary one, perhaps, but real nonetheless. She stepped out into the hallway, heading toward the living room where Adrian was curled up with a book in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. He looked up as she entered. "I can't believe how fast she's growing," Emma said, sitting beside him. "It's like every day her face changes." "She has your eyes," Adrian murmured. "They're fierce, like fire under glass." Emma smiled, then sighed. I should be doing more. Looking for work. Trying to stand on my own 2 feet. You are standing, Adrian said gently. You carried life into this world. You survived heartbreak. You're raising Grace with more strength than most people ever find. Emma looked down. I don't want you to think I'm leaning on you, because I'm weak. I don't. Silence settled between them. Then Adrian set his book down and turned fully toward her. Emma, he said slowly, I know this started in chaos. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But I can't ignore what I feel anymore. She looked up, heart hammering. I care about you. Deeply. And I care about Grace. She's not my daughter by blood, but I would do anything for her. For both of you. Emma's breath caught in her throat. You don't have to say anything, Adrian added quickly. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens next, it's your choice. No pressure. No expectations. Emma stared at him, emotions crashing like waves inside her. She wanted to say something. But then, a loud buzz echoed from the front door. Adrian frowned and stood up. That's strange. I wasn't expecting anyone. He walked to the door and opened it. Emma froze when she heard the voice from the hallway. Well, if it isn't the new daddy. Jake. The confrontation. Emma stepped forward instantly, her arms wrapped tightly around Grace. Jake stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, smirking like he owned the room. Nice place, he said, glancing around. Looks expensive. Adrian remained calm. What do you want? Jake's eyes landed on Emma. I came to see my daughter. You're not welcome here, she said sharply. You had your chance. You left. Jake stepped forward. I have rights, Emma. And I'm not going to let some billionaire buy his way into my kid's life. Adrian stepped in front of her. Back away. Jake scoffed. Or what? You'll sue me again? Send another lawyer after me. Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't move an inch. But his tone was steel. I won't warn you twice. You show up uninvited again, and I'll make sure the only thing you see of Grace is a photo from a courtroom bench. Jake sneered. You think money scares me? No, Adrian said. But truth does. And I have plenty of it. Jake glared at him, then turned back to Emma. This isn't over. And with that, he stormed off down the hallway. Adrian closed the door calmly. Emma was shaking. Grace whimpered against her shoulder. Adrian turned toward her. Are you okay? She nodded slowly, then looked up. You didn't even flinch. I would never let him hurt you, he said. And I never will. Emma didn't respond right away. But in that moment, after the storm had passed, she reached out and took Adrian's hand in hers. And she didn't let go. The door clicked shut behind Jake, but the chill he left behind still hung in the air like smoke. Emma stood motionless in the middle of the living room, Grace held tightly against her chest. Her hands trembled, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She hadn't seen Jake since that awful night at the hospital, when he walked out on her, on their baby. And now he had shown up at Adrian's home, uninvited and unrepentant. She turned to Adrian, who was already locking the front door, double-checking the security system. Is it always going to be like this? She whispered. He glanced at her, his gaze firm but gentle. No, it won't. Not if I can help it. Adrian crossed the room and carefully placed a hand on her back. He didn't ask to hold Grace. He didn't try to take charge. He just stood beside her, solid, warm, steady. Emma let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I should have called the police, she muttered. You didn't have to. I already did. Emma looked at him in surprise. I reported the trespass the moment he stepped into this building, Adrian said calmly. There's security footage, and with the restraining boundaries we're establishing, it's just the beginning. She blinked. You're already taking legal steps? Adrian nodded. He won't be able to get near you or Grace again without consequences. But I need you to understand something. What? He turned fully toward her, his expression sincere. I will never make decisions for you, but I will always protect your right to make them. Emma stared at him, moved by the clarity in his words. Jake had never once asked how she felt. Adrian didn't need to. He just acted in her defense, without taking away her voice. That night, after Grace had fallen asleep, Emma joined Adrian on the balcony. The city lights glittered around them like stars fallen to earth. "I want to talk to a lawyer," she said finally. "About custody. About full parental rights. I need to protect Grace myself." Adrian gave a quiet smile. "I already have someone on standby. I'll make the call." Emma laughed softly under her breath. "Of course you do." But the laughter faded quickly, replaced by something heavier. "You know, I used to think I needed Jake. That I couldn't raise a baby without him. But when he walked out, it broke something in me. And then you walked in, and I realized maybe that brokenness made space for something better." Adrian looked at her, heart thudding in his chest. "I didn't expect any of this," she admitted. "Not you. Not Grace. Not the way I feel every time I see you looking at her like she's yours." "I look at her like that," he said softly, "because I wish she were." Emma's eyes widened. Adrian reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, worn photo. He handed it to her. It was a sonogram, dated 5 years ago. "That's my daughter," he said. "Her name was Sophia. My ex was 6 months pregnant when she miscarried. It changed everything. Our relationship didn't survive it, and I never really got the chance to be a father." Emma looked at the photo, then at him. Her heart cracked open. "Adrian, You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to turn this into something you're not ready for. I just wanted you to know why I care so deeply. Why Grace feels like a second chance." Emma stepped closer, the photo still in her hand. "I don't know what this is between us yet," she whispered. "But I do know that every time Grace smiles, it's because she feels safe. And I know that's because of you." Adrian swallowed hard. "That's enough for me." The next morning, Emma woke early to the sound of soft music playing in the kitchen. She followed it with Grace in her arms, drawn by the smell of cinnamon and coffee. Adrian was standing by the stove again, flipping something in a skillet. "You cook more than any billionaire I've ever heard of," she teased. He turned and grinned. "Good morning. Hope you're hungry. I made French toast." Emma sat Grace in her little rocker on the counter, where she could see both of them. The baby cooed softly, eyes wide with curiosity. "She looks so alert this morning," Adrian said, smiling at Grace. "Like she knows we're talking about her." Emma beamed. "She's going to be a handful. I can already tell." After breakfast, Adrian offered to watch Grace while Emma took a long shower. She agreed, reluctantly, until she came back to find Adrian lying on the living room rug, making silly faces at Grace while she gurgled in response. Emma stood in the doorway and watched, something warm spreading through her chest. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was becoming a life. Later that day, the unexpected message. That afternoon, Emma received a message from a woman she hadn't spoken to in over a year. Heather, Jake's sister. Emma hesitated before opening it. "Hey, Emma. I know I'm the last person you expected to hear from, but I wanted to say, I saw what Jake did. I heard he showed up at your place. I want you to know I don't support him. I'm so sorry for everything. Also, if you need a witness for court, I'll testify. I saw how he treated you during your pregnancy. He doesn't deserve to be anywhere near that baby." Emma stared at the screen, stunned. She handed the phone to Adrian. He read it in silence, then nodded. "This could help. A lot." Emma exhaled. "I didn't expect that." "You deserve allies," Adrian said. "And you're starting to find them." That evening, they sat on the couch together, Grace nestled in Emma's arms. The TV was on, but muted. Neither of them was really watching. The lights were low. The mood was quiet. Emma turned to Adrian. "Why haven't you tried to kiss me?" Adrian looked surprised. "Because you just gave birth. Because your heart is healing. Because I didn't want to rush you." She looked down. "What if I'm ready?" His breath caught. Emma leaned in, slowly, carefully. Their lips met in a kiss that wasn't rushed or fiery, but deep and steady. Like everything else between them, it was a beginning, a real one. The kiss wasn't dramatic or heated. It was quiet, warm, and honest. It didn't ask for more. It didn't demand a future. It simply existed in that moment, two broken people gently discovering something that felt like healing. When Emma finally pulled away, her cheeks were flushed, her lips barely parted. Adrian's eyes searched hers, not with lust, but with care. "Was that okay?" Emma nodded, barely whispering. It was more than okay. He smiled softly, but didn't reach for more. Instead, he leaned back just a little, giving her space to process whatever she needed. That was one of the things she admired most about Adrian. He never pushed. He waited. He listened. And she was starting to realize just how rare that was. The days that followed. The kiss changed everything, but also, strangely, nothing. Adrian didn't suddenly become clingy or expect constant affection. Emma didn't retreat or avoid him. Their rhythm remained the same, but it felt lighter now. Like a veil had been lifted. They still moved around the apartment like a team, Adrian warming bottles, while Emma rocked Grace to sleep, Emma folding baby clothes, while Adrian read over legal documents at the dining table. But now, their fingertips brushed with purpose. Now, their good-night glances lingered just a second longer. Still, Emma was careful. She'd been here before, in love, or what she thought was love. With Jake, the fall had been fast and thrilling, but the landing had shattered her. This time, she wanted something different. She wanted steady, a step toward the past. One rainy afternoon, Emma sat on the couch, cradling Grace, while Adrian scrolled through emails nearby. The soft patter of raindrops against the windows created a calming soundtrack to the quiet. Out of nowhere, Emma said, "I want to visit my mom's grave." Adrian looked up. "Do you want me to come with you?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes. The next morning, they drove to the small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. Emma wore a simple black coat and carried a bouquet of daisies, her mother's favorite flower. They walked side by side, the wet grass soft beneath their feet. Grace was tucked securely into her carrier, sleeping soundly against Emma's chest. When they reached the gravestone, Emma stopped. Lily Marie Thompson, beloved nurse, mother, and light in the darkness. Emma knelt down and brushed raindrops from a stone. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. Adrian stood respectfully a few steps behind, giving her space but not leaving. "I brought Grace," Emma continued, her voice breaking slightly. "She's beautiful. You'd love her." She took a shaky breath. "A lot has happened since you left. I made some mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. I let myself believe I wasn't enough." Tears slid down her cheeks. "But I'm trying to be strong, Mom. I'm trying to be the kind of woman you raised me to be. And I think I might be okay now." She turned slightly toward Adrian. "I met someone, and I know you to prove." Adrian stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Emma placed the flowers at the base of the headstone and stood. As they walked back to the car, she whispered, "Thank you for being there." Adrian squeezed her hand. "Always." Legal action begins. 2 days later, the legal proceedings for full custody began. Adrian's legal team worked swiftly, filing the necessary paperwork to begin establishing Jake's abandonment and emotional neglect. The statement from Heather, Jake's sister, proved invaluable. She provided screenshots of messages Jake had sent during Emma's pregnancy that were dismissive, even mocking. Emma sat quietly in the conference room as the lawyers explained the next steps. "You have a very strong case," one of the attorneys said, "especially considering his lack of involvement since the birth and his threats. With your testimony, Emma, and the written statements, there's a high chance of securing sole custody." Emma nodded, but her hands were still trembling. Adrian noticed. After the meeting, he took her out for a walk along the lake. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I will be," she replied. "It's just part of me still feels guilty." "Why?" "Because there was a time I wanted Jake to love me. I wanted him to fight for me. And now, I'm the one fighting against him." Adrian stopped walking. He turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're not fighting him, Emma. You're protecting your daughter. And yourself. That's not guilt, that's bravery." She blinked fast, trying not to cry again. "You always say the right thing." "That's because it's the truth." A quiet night turns into more. One evening, Emma came into the living room wearing a simple navy sweater and leggings. her hair still damp from a shower. Grace was already asleep in her crib, the monitor beside her softly blinking. Adrian was on the couch with a book in his lap, but he looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Movie," he offered. She nodded and joined him. They watched in silence for a while, something romantic, slow-paced. But Emma wasn't really watching. Her gaze kept drifting to Adrian's profile. The way his brow furrowed slightly in thought. The way his fingers tapped the armrest absent-mindedly. The way he smelled like clean cotton and cinnamon. Halfway through the movie, she whispered, "Adrian." He looked over. "Yeah. Do you ever feel like this, it's too good to be real?" He paused. "Every day." Emma let out a breathy laugh. "Good. Me too." She turned toward him, folding one leg under her. "Do you ever worry I'll just wake up and decide I'm not ready for all this?" "I'd be lying if I said no," he replied. "But I'd never hold it against you. If you needed space, time, distance, I'd give it. All of it." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "I hope not," he said with a smile. Emma leaned in slowly. This time, she kissed him first. And this time, it wasn't just gentle. It was full of knowing that they were both moving forward into something real. When they parted, Emma rested her forehead against his. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she whispered. Adrian's voice was barely audible. "I think I already have." Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the penthouse, casting a soft golden glow across the living room floor. Emma stood barefoot in the kitchen, one hand holding a warm mug of tea, the other cradling Grace against her chest in a wrap. Adrian stepped out of the bedroom, adjusting his shirt cuffs and running a hand through his still damp hair. He paused in the hallway, taking in the sight of them. The two girls who had, in just a few short weeks, turned his world upside down. "You're staring," Emma said with a soft smirk, not turning around. He chuckled. "Can you blame me?" She finally turned to face him. Her hair was in a messy bun, and she wore one of his oversized t-shirts with leggings. She looked radiant. "I don't think I've ever been looked at like that before," she said quietly. "That's because no one's ever seen you the way I do," he replied. Then, after a pause, "And they were fools for missing it." Emma set down her tea and kissed Grace's forehead. "You're dangerous when you talk like that." "Why?" "Because I could start believing in fairy tales again." Adrian crossed the room and gently placed a hand on her waist. "Then let me be the one who rewrites yours." Emma looked up at him, her heart fluttering. But before she could say anything, Grace made a soft snorting sound and let out a tiny sneeze. They both laughed. "Okay, princess," Emma whispered to her daughter. "I guess it's still your story after all." The court date approaches. The following week brought a whirlwind of emotions. The custody hearing was set. It wasn't a trial yet, but it would determine whether Jake had any standing to demand parental rights or visitation. Adrian's lawyers were confident. Jake hadn't contacted Emma again, nor had he provided any support, financial or emotional, since Grace's birth. Heather, his sister, had submitted her formal testimony and even offered to appear if needed. But Emma still felt the weight of it all. She didn't want to fight. She just wanted peace for herself and for Grace. The night before the hearing, she couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, the city lights glowing faintly beyond the glass walls. Adrian entered the room quietly. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. Finally, she said, "I'm terrified." He came to her side. "Of losing the case?" "No. Of losing myself in this version of me that I didn't choose. A single mother fighting in court. Living in someone else's home. Falling in love while still learning how to survive." Adrian knelt in front of her and took her hands in his. "You're not living in someone else's home, Emma. You're building a life with someone who's choosing you every single day. And you're not falling in love while surviving. You're surviving because you're learning how to love again." She blinked fast, her heart catching in her throat. "Tomorrow will be hard," he added. "But you won't be alone. You never will be again." Emma nodded, finally letting her body fall into his arms. He held her there, breathing with her, grounding her. And for the first time before a major storm, she slept soundly. The hearing. The courtroom was cold. Too white. Too formal. Emma sat beside her attorney, her hands resting on her lap, fingers slightly trembling. Adrian was behind her in the row of supporters. He gave her a small nod as she looked back nervously. Jake entered 10 minutes late. He looked unbothered, casual even. His blazer was wrinkled, and he wore sneakers with visible dirt on the soles. He barely glanced at Emma. When the judge entered, the proceedings began. Emma's lawyer opened calmly, presenting the facts. Jake's abandonment during labor. His lack of contact. His aggressive visit weeks later. The emotional toll on the mother. The stability and support Emma had created since then. Then came Heather's statement, which the judge read silently. Her words were powerful. My brother does not have the maturity, compassion, or responsibility to raise a child. I love him, but he abandoned someone who needed him the most, and I will not support his claim just because we share DNA. When Jake was given the floor, he stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets. I was scared, he said plainly. People make mistakes. I shouldn't be punished forever. Do you currently have a job? The judge asked. I'm figuring things out. Do you pay child support? I haven't had the means. Have you visited your daughter? Jake glanced briefly at Emma. I tried once, but she wouldn't let me. The judge's tone was steady but pointed. That one visit was unannounced and aggressive, according to the reports. Do you have any plans or means to support your daughter? Jake hesitated. I might get work soon. I just want to be in her life. The judge closed his folder and looked at both parties. Parental rights are not symbolic. They come with responsibility, with action, with presence. At this time, I see no effort made by Mr. Carter to fulfill those duties. Emma held her breath. I am granting full custody to Ms. Emma Thompson, with no visitation rights assigned at this time. Mr. Carter may petition in the future if he demonstrates significant, sustained change. Emma exhaled sharply. The courtroom blurred for a moment. She had won. Not just the case, her freedom. After the hearing, outside the courthouse, the wind was sharp. Emma stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the sky as tears spilled silently down her cheeks. Adrian walked over and wrapped his coat around her shoulders. It's over, he whispered. No, she said quietly. It's just beginning. He took her hand. Let's begin it together. That night, back at the penthouse, Emma laid Grace in her crib gently, tears still glistening in her eyes. She turned around to find Adrian standing in the doorway of the nursery, his hands in his pockets. She walked to him slowly. I'm yours, she said softly. All of me. Not because you saved me, but because you saw me. Adrian stepped forward, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her, longer, deeper this time. When they pulled apart, he whispered, I've been yours since the moment I walked through that hospital door. Emma rested her forehead against his. Then let's never walk away. He nodded. They stood there in the quiet glow of the nursery, hearts intertwined, their daughter sleeping peacefully beside them. And for the first time in her life, Emma felt like she had finally arrived at the one place she never thought she'd find. Home. 3 months had passed since the courtroom decision granted Emma full custody of Grace. 3 months since Jake vanished from their lives like a fading shadow. 3 months since Emma allowed herself to believe, not just in survival, but in happiness. The spring air had warmed into early summer, and with it came signs of change everywhere. Emma stood barefoot on the balcony of Adrian's penthouse, the city glowing beneath her like a tapestry of light and possibility. Grace was asleep inside, and Adrian was in the kitchen, humming softly while prepping dinner. From this view, life looked nothing like what she once feared it would become. No more cheap apartments filled with silence. No more walking on eggshells. No more waking up alone. She wrapped her arms around herself, not out of sadness, but disbelief. The kind that settles in when life finally becomes good, and you're not sure you deserve it yet. But then the glass door slid open, and Adrian stepped out holding a plate in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. Miss Thompson, he said with a smile, your presence is requested at the table. Emma laughed softly, turning toward him. You're still calling me that? He set the food down on the small patio table. Until you tell me I can call you something else. Her smile faltered slightly, because lately, that question had started to surface more and more between them. Neither had said it outright, but the air was charged with it. With more. She sat at the table as Adrian poured her sparkling water and placed a grilled salmon dish in front of her. "This looks amazing," she said. "I Googled it this morning," he admitted with a sheepish grin. "Apparently, babies develop better when their moms are well fed." "According to Google, huh? And every nerve in my body since you walked into my life." Emma looked at him, her heart pulsing behind her ribs. "Adrian," she said softly, "you've done so much for me. For us. I wake up every day grateful, but also a little afraid." "Of what?" "That one day you'll realize we're still a mess. That I'm still figuring this out. That Grace cries at 3 a.m. and I don't have a clue what I'm doing half the time." Adrian reached across the table, took her hand, and said, "I already know all of that. And I'm still here." She blinked fast. "I don't want perfection," he continued. "I want real. I want you, with your doubts and your fears and your spit-up covered sweaters. I want Grace, with her early morning chaos and late-night giggles. I want the whole storm." Emma smiled through tears. "You always know what to say." "No," he said. "I just finally know what I want. A quiet proposal." Later that night, Emma stood in Grace's room after a bath, dressing her in soft cotton pajamas while humming quietly. The nursery had been redesigned, muted pinks, warm fairy lights, a bookshelf full of bedtime stories, and a rocking chair that creaked just a little too much. Adrian had done it all himself, piece by piece. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. She rocked Grace slowly, watching her tiny eyes blink sleepily. And then she whispered, "Do you know what I wished for the day I found out about you? I wished for someone who wouldn't leave. And now here we are." A quiet knock on the door broke the moment. Adrian stepped in, holding something behind his back. Emma looked up, smiling. "She's almost out." "I won't stay long," he said softly. "I just wanted to give her something." He revealed what he had been hiding, a small music box made of cherry wood. When he opened it, a soft lullaby floated into the room. Emma gasped. That's the same song my mom used to play. I found it through an old online registry. One of her nursing coworkers had posted about it on a blog. I tracked it down." Emma looked at him, stunned. "Why would you go through all that trouble?" Adrian stepped closer. "Because she gave me peace once. Now I want Grace to have that too." He placed the music box beside the crib and turned to Emma. "I lied," he said quietly. She blinked. "About what?" "I said I wasn't staying long. But the truth is, I want to stay forever." Her breath caught. "I know this isn't how things usually go. And I know we're still learning. But I love you, Emma. I love you like I've never loved anyone. And I love Grace like she was born for my own soul." He reached into his pocket. And there it was, a ring. Simple. Elegant. Silver with a soft diamond in the center. "I'm not asking for a wedding tomorrow. Or a perfect life. I'm just asking for the chance to keep choosing you. Every day. Will you let me?" Emma stared at him, tears filling her eyes. Then she smiled, wider than she ever had. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Adrian. 1,000 times, yes." 1 year later. The garden behind the small chapel was alive with flowers, white lilies, soft blue hydrangeas, and wild sprigs of lavender. Guests gathered in rows of wooden chairs, the sun casting a warm glow over the celebration. Emma stood in a cream-colored dress, simple and soft, her hair loosely curled, holding Grace, now toddling and curious, in her arms. Adrian stood at the altar, in a navy suit and a smile that refused to fade. They had chosen to marry not in luxury, not with cameras or media coverage, but in intimacy, surrounded by the people who mattered, the people who had stayed. When Emma reached him, she passed Grace to Heather, who had become not only an ally, but a friend. "I'm not promising you ease," Emma said during her vows, "but I'm promising you truth. I'm promising you laughter. And I'm promising you that no matter how broken I was, I will never be that woman again, because you helped me find my way back to life." Adrian, blinking away tears, responded, and I promise to never stop seeing you, even when the world forgets. I promise to hold you through storms, through doubts, through every version of ourselves that the years may bring. You and Grace, you are my purpose." They kissed beneath the archway of ivy and wildflowers, their baby clapping in the background, and the guests laughing through their tears. It was never about money, or rescue, or fairy tales. It was about seeing someone truly seeing them, when they're at their lowest, and loving them anyway. Emma had been left while in labor, but she was found by a man who didn't ask for perfection, just the chance to stay. And that was all she ever needed. Thank you for following Emma and Adrian's story.